Hi, in this video I want to discuss fighting for the truth, and once you know the truth, how I am knowing the truth and fighting that fight makes it seem all the more futile. Realizing that the game that you're playing, regardless of knowing the truth, is a losing game no matter what you can do. There's no way to win the game that you're playing. Living in a futile world, feeling the actual meaninglessness or the lack of any real purpose in the contrived purpose that we can create. And obviously, we can create purpose, but it's also a very contrived thing that we do. We create a purpose, only a purpose that was there once we've already deprived ourselves. There's only a purpose in eliminating a negative, and that's the only thing we're doing is finding purposes in the elimination of negatives. We create one, we contrive one, we eliminate a negative, and we find a purpose in doing that, even though the purpose isn't really there. It's just a contrivance that we've created to find some kind of useful, meaningful existence, so some sort of um, motivational thing that you may use to guide you through a living existence, because all we are doing is enduring the game that we've been forced into, and that's all we're doing is living the lie, finding some kind of meaning in an existence where there is no real meaning other than to avoid pain. And there is a meaning, and the value does exist. It's not like saying there's no value. It's fighting that fight once you, and especially once you know the fight, sort of like living the pain, living the philosophy, understanding it, actually feeling it. You can live the philosophy but not feel the philosophy. You're only feeling it by way of principle. And the principle, you can have principle but not feel or truly understand a philosophy or an idea, or being a victim of a psychological victim of recognition of the philosophy or the meaninglessness based on a philosophy of truth that you're living. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Actually, there's only real one way to do it, and that's to I suppose to be predisposed to the idea of living in a bad bad existence where you recognize the truth. But there's still meaning, regardless of whatever you may be seeing. There's meaning, and there is a purpose, and the purpose is only limiting the negative. There's no purpose. There is a purpose, but the purpose is a contrived one that isn't forced, and it's only open to the possibility based on the deterministic mechanism we're living in, and we're just sort of forced to the motions of the day-to-day grind that we're living in, the second-to-second grind, the moment-to-moment grind that we're living in, and there's nothing we can do about it but to be victims of that circumstance, like I mentioned before. But once you know the truth, it's sort of like knowing that you're going to lose the fight, but still having to fight for the right to do as much as you can for the right side. Even though you know you're going to lose the war, you can win this battle. Still fighting for that right, and still having that dissonance, having the motivation to win the battle, but knowing you're going to win or lose the war in the end. Sort of like living the philosophy, understanding the true meaning of what's going on, but not really knowing that the fight's only a losing fight and there's nothing you could do, recognizing that and still living in it, and sort of like having a wound, a physical wound, living that and realizing, oh well, once this wound's gone, once the sickness is gone, I'm going to be right back to where I was psychologically. So sometimes it's just a lose fight, it's a losing fight, but you also have, on top of that losing fight and that recognition, you're going to have to, and feeling that recognition is the recognition that is the also the ability for more pain and more suffering to be added on top of that. So there's no really reaching any zero in this game, and that's really, I guess, the ultimate point. You're never going to reach a real zero. You're going to be constantly fighting, and once you realize that, and you're not so caught up and addicted to the game, or you're not caught up in the game. Obviously, we're all addicted to a certain degree. Even if you do end up finding a reason to not live anymore, or end up following that act, you're still going to find some kind of degree of addiction. But you recognize that, and that can end up being um, even worse when you recognize the truth and still realize that there's nothing you could do about it. But still being caught up in the game, there's still an addiction, regardless of the fact that you they find reason or purpose and no longer going on. Um, and obviously, we all feed off of each other, and even if someone dies, it's a self-perpetuating mechanism where there's going to be pain no matter what. It's about reducing the amount of pain and knowing the best outcome, but there's only so much you can do, and the outcome is already negative. Once there's one living thing that can feel, there's already a negative that's there to be experienced, because you need to experience a negative probably psychologically or physically to interact with the world that you're living in, to either eliminate yourself or to just experience any day-to-day experience that you're experiencing. There's only so much you can do, but it's almost this recognition of knowing the game, realizing there's nothing to it, and also realizing on top of that, that no matter what happens to you, even if you do get over a tension or some kind of pain, there's nothing really waiting on the other side but more frustration, sort of like the frustration of being caught up in a psychological game of addiction or of a negative reaction, and then realizing it's either going between that, a self-perpetuating mechanism like that, or going through a mechanism of realizing some kind of meaningless or purposelessness that's already there, and it's either being caught up between that or that. And otherwise, it's sort of like the whole equilibrium idea, where it's either you go through that or you go through something else, because something's going to be causing you some kind of tension, and there's only so much you can do about it. You're either going to be dealing with the issues that you deal with on the day-to-day basis, or you're going to sit there dealing with the issues for like there's no life without an issue, dealing with the issue that there's only so much you can do about the game, or you're going to be and the game is relying on everyone else. Everyone else is having a reaction, this, that, and the other thing. And there's only so much you can do. If someone else wins, you're losing. If you win, it depends on how many bodies are stacked below you. They're going to be losing. So it's a matter of realizing what's the best case scenario. But there's only so much you can do. It's either being caught up in your addictions and dealing with the tensions of those addictions and the negatives of those addictions, or it's dealing with being caught up in the realization that there's not much to accomplish in this game. So it's about being caught up between those two different things, and there's only so much you can do but to fight those urges and addictions. And if you're not fighting those, you're going to be fighting something else. You're going to be constantly fighting some kind of tension. There's only so much you can do about it, but it's that recognition that there's only so much you can do. There's never a real zero you're going to be reaching. You're going to be constantly fighting a game, an uphill battle that you can only do so much to win. And there's no winning. There's only losing less and losing more. You can only lose less than a person losing more. If you're the winner, you're losing less, but you're still a loser because you're part of the whole game. You're causing a loser, and almost in a way you're more of a loser because you're causing more losing. For you, yes, your glory, yes, you win. Your pride and glory can be satisfied, but that doesn't mean anything compared to the suffering you're causing. You're just experiencing less pain in the winning that you're experiencing, at least according to you and the thing that you're winning at. But you're causing more pain, and that pain carries more weight than the satisfaction and that you get from winning because it's on your own or whatever the team. One team, because it's just an elimination of a negative. There's only so much, and you're causing more pain doing it. Therefore, you're a bigger loser throughout the bigger game because you're causing more suffering in and of itself. Being the catalyst of that winning mechanism, that winning circumstance. In a way, that's almost the way you can categorize it and apply it to a certain body or thing that's causing suffering. So in a way, yes, they're losing, but they're carrying the weight of the loss. So therefore, they're losing more. That weight on them is far greater. But also, you're the one that's losing the most in terms of causing the most losing. So either way, it's just a lose-lose game. There's only so much you can do to not lose the game, and losing is a natural part of the game because that's the only way that this evolutionary mechanism worked. It was built off of those things. But that's the only way things could exist. It's not because it's also built off of those things, but that's the only way they can be functioned because it's based on the mechanism and the way that the universe works. So there's no other way that life could have formed, and therefore there's meaning to this existence. There's no meaning regardless because the life would be forming in almost exactly the same way, because there's no other fundamental mechanism running the game other than the function that causes these games to happen. It only happens one distinct way, and if it's something different happens, it's just happening different in the same way. It's going to happen the same way regardless. So it's something that's there regardless. So it doesn't matter what it may be. The function's still the same regardless of how you may have gotten there as a species or a living biological organism. There's something there regardless. And the purpose is always going to be a purpose of eliminating a negative over anything else. So I think that's basically the basic idea of the video. But there's only trying. The problem, once you know the truth, fighting for what you know is a losing fight. So it's either lose and lose, sort of like and caught up in discussion about philosophy. There's only so much you can do when you're discussing philosophy. You can sit there and have an argument with someone, or you can sit there and talk about how much life sucks with someone that agrees with you. There's nothing else you can do. That's the only game that we're playing. Either sit there and talk about life, drinking with your buddies, your friends, your drinking buddies, drinking friends, and then talking about how life sucks, or sitting there and just talking with someone on Tiny Chat, or sitting there and talking to someone about life, sitting there both in your recognition, only doing so much, realizing there's nothing to do, realizing the futile fight that you're being caught up in, or there's sitting there trying to argue with people that don't necessarily do it, and realizing how futile the game is, and realizing that they don't recognize it, even though you know the truth, and you're sitting there constantly fighting a battle, an uphill battle that you're trying to win so much of what seems futile, and you're trying to convince people of a truth that you know there's no winning. And you're trying to convince the problem that you're trying to fix is the thing that you're trying to take care of. So that's another analogy, trying to fix the problem by, it's almost like if they have to be convinced, they're not worth convincing. You have to convince someone that's part of the issue, and the issue has no meaning, and you're trying to fight that issue in the very arguments you're trying to have with the people that are given meaning. that are giving meaning to the game or caught up in the game. So it's almost it's a negative or negative. You're arguing or you're agreeing with someone about how much life sucks, or you're being reminded constantly how much life has no real meaning by only negative meaning by the fact that there's only people sitting there arguing you against you or believing in delusions and reinforcing those delusions. So it's just a constant uphill battle. That's the issue. You're confronted with the issue regardless of the futile issue, or you're constantly dealing with the issue based on the fact that you're fighting and combating those people that are causing the issue to begin with. And you realize there's only so much you can do in the game, and you have to constantly fight that battle. There's only so much you can do to fight the battle. And you're constantly facing it, regardless of where you are, no matter where you are, in any direction. It's a consumption mechanism. You're surrounded by the issue, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's an issue where you're constantly confronted with it, and there's no way out of it. Regardless, I think that's all I need to mention. There's nothing else to mention. The same basic idea is just a different way of looking at it. So if there's anything else I need to say in another video, there's always another video to make. And so that's it. So until next time, see you later. Bye.